Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Unlimited. Today, we are talking about how to cure comparisonitis, which starts by understanding the cause and that this isn't just a you problem. It's often framed like it is a you problem because I think, for one, it impacts you. It's very personal, but also because we live in a highly individualized society that kind of makes everything about you as an individual and really doesn't look at the social systems that play into what creates some of these dynamics. And then, of course, we use terms that emphasize it as an individual problem. So, yeah, comparisonitis is very much like imposter syndrome in that it is rooted in the dynamics of our society that we then turn into an affliction of your own mindset, of your own mental space. It's something that is a you issue. So I want to start by acknowledging that while it is extremely personal, it is not your fault. It is not something deficient in you. If you struggle with comparing yourself with others and then feeling less than, feeling triggered that you are in some way deficient, where you doubt yourself and your abilities and struggle with taking action or making choices or doing things because of that self-doubt that has been exacerbated. It is a very personal feeling and it is not your fault. So I want to acknowledge that first and foremost. That is not to say that there isn't something you can do about it. So this is what we're going to look at. We're going to look at what is going on. I actually was originally calling this episode Causes and Cures for Comparisonitis because who doesn't like alliteration? But what we are going to look at is a story, first and foremost, about myself. I'm going to share a little bit about my own journey, kind of broadly, but talking about what that looked like, losing myself and losing my self-trust, sacrificing authenticity for belonging, survival mode and how it upholds societal norms, engaging individual and collective healing, and 4 steps to recalibrate your inner compass, i.e. address comparisonitis. I also want to acknowledge that things like this, because they are things we are surrounded by continuously, it's very hard not to get caught up in this experience. And it can be extremely sticky, especially because we are so close. It is so personal while being something that's perpetuated around us. So if it is something that feels particularly sticky, that you're really struggling with, and it is dragging you down and keeping you from doing the things that are important to you, things that you want to do, achieving goals, going after life experiences, whatever it is, if it's particularly sticky and you would like additional support, that is what I'm here for. And I want you to know you deserve support. You are worthy of support. That's one of the things that this particular issue and the issues related to it can make you think that you shouldn't have it. It is part of what creates a stigma around seeking help. Well, it doesn't look like other people are seeking help. Like they seem to be able to do it just fine on their own. So why can't I? Sometimes we're even told that directly. So I want you to know that it's okay if you need support. That's what I'm here for. I have a free exploration call that is available to you if you would like that additional support. There's no pressure to do anything in particular. It really is just, what is it that would be most supportive for you right now? There's a link in the show notes. So if you want to go schedule a call, you can do that. And now, without further ado, let's get started. Hey there, I'm Valerie Friedlander, Certified Life Business Alignment Coach, and this is Unlimited. This podcast bridges the individual and the societal, scientific and spiritual, positive and negative, nerdy and no, there's just a lot of nerdy. Come on board and let's unlock a life that's as badass as you are. I'm going to start with a story, and it may not sound like it's related to comparisonitis at first, but it has to do with why we get caught up in comparisonitis. It has to do with the sense of self being moved outside of ourselves. And I say sense of self, what I really mean is like our sense of okayness being moved outside of ourselves. When I was young, I remember knowing that I was awesome. I had a sense of myself and being a cool person, being an interesting person, being confident and creative and magical and powerful. And at some point, that changed. And I can look at my life and see certain instances, certain experiences, certain times, moving, going to a new school, getting bullied. There were things in there that I can point to, that I can be like, yeah, those things had an impact in a really diminishing way for me. But I remember getting the messages around being too girly, too big, too imaginative, too silly, too loud, too talkative, too emotional. And of course, that makes me think, yeah, isn't it kind of weird that like so often we get these messages that we're too much, and somehow that message means that we're not good enough? Like, you're too much, so therefore you're wrong. You're deficient. You're not good enough. You need to be different. You need to be smaller. You need to be less big. You need to take up less space is really, I think, what that messaging is. But I knew that I was not belonging. I did a workshop the other day with Amina Chaudhry of Zarafa Consulting. She's an anti-racist DEI strategist, DEI executive leadership coach, speaker, consultant, and I will include a link to her information in the show notes because she's awesome, and I encourage you all to follow her. She said, we don't notice belonging. We notice not belonging. We notice when we don't belong. And that really stood out to me because that's definitely like where my focus goes is where I don't feel like I belong, where I feel like I'm being excluded. And I have had to do a lot of work around noticing the places where I do belong and the dynamics of those privileges that I hold from that. I bring that up just because I think this is one of those things where it's very easy to pay attention to the places where we've been harmed and uplift those and not notice the other places. So I desperately wanted to be liked. I wanted to belong by the people who were excluding me because I felt unsafe with that exclusion. So it wasn't worth fighting to be me. I learned to fit in. Or at least try to fit in. I am highly empathetic, and that made me a very good people pleaser because I could pick up on energy, pick up on emotion, and adjust so that I could do what I felt like would allow me to fit in better. Validation of my worth was based in whether you liked me. And that transition happened over a period of time. I can't say exactly when it happened, but I can very much see and feel in my memory the difference. Likability had turned into success, access, belonging, and okayness. So for me to be okay, I needed you to like me. So people pleasing basically meant that I put myself on the back burner and I lost connection with who I was and what I liked, because that was not serving me very well. In the book, The Myth of Normal, Gabor Mate has a whole chapter that talks about how we learn this disconnect between authenticity and attachment. And attachment is more of a priority because that's what we need for survival at an early age, much earlier than we have an understanding of ourselves and have the ability to develop that authenticity. And how we learn that to belong and to be okay, you aren't allowed to utilize what you need to be okay in an authentic way, in a sustainable way. But in the moment, that need to belong dominates. So that led to fear of making decisions, because if I made a decision, I was taking responsibility, which meant that I could also be the cause of rejection. And the fear of rejection felt much scarier to me in that time, and that became my default. I let indecision choose for me, which then led me to say yes to emotionally harmful relationships that affirmed both my fears of not being worthy and valuable, as well as the belief that I couldn't trust myself, that my inner compass was broken, and ultimately that I was broken, so I was not trustworthy. I recently read an essay by Anne Helen Peterson called #Tradwife Life as Self-Annihilation. #Tradwife is about traditional wife Instagrams and the people who use that hashtag who are considered like traditional wife molds or whatever. I don't follow this, but the essay itself was very interesting, and I want to read a little section of it for you, because when I read it, I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's what I learned early. Like, that wasn't as something that I got later. So the excerpt reads, "To embody ideal femininity is to serve others at all times, of course, but it is also to aspire to self-annihilation. The absence of desire, the absence of needs, the absence of resistance as you hollow out the self and replace it with the desires and needs of others. As in, gradually you realize that your dreams aren't just mixing with someone else's, but wholly supplanted by them. Any time that is your own is shaded with guilt if you aren't also with your children or cleaning your house. You don't know what clothes you like, just what clothes your spouse likes you in. The compass of who you are, what you value, what you understand as not you, it's been demagnetized." And so reading that, I was like, wow. I mean, that is what I was experiencing way before I ever got married, was the self demagnetized, my self compass. And I bring this forward. I talk about this demagnetization of the self because I see it play a pivotal role in the way we experience this comparisonitis and how we compare to other people. Because when our focus is outside of ourselves, on other people and what they're doing to determine our okayness, that is what comparisonitis is. And I've noticed with the clients that I've done work with, usually where the comparisonitis is triggered is related to an area that feels insecure, whether it is financial insecurity, like with their business, with their work, or whether it is belonging and whether or not they're going to be accepted or rejected. Those are the two big ones that I see a lot of. Like, am I doing good enough? Am I okay in some area of my life? So this magnet to the outside norms. And it's this demagnetization of the self where our sense of self is external to us, thus making us unable to set boundaries because boundaries are our self-container and who we are. And it means that we're looking external to ourselves for an understanding of where we exist in the structure. Are we where we're supposed to be in the structures? We are conditioned to focus on, but not to see the structures that work to demagnetize us from our inner compass. So that's why I'm trying to pull these forward. I am learning to see them myself, to be quite honest. So the more demagnetized we are from our inner compass, from ourselves, the more susceptible we are. And then the more demagnetized we become because we are looking to see if we're okay. And we're looking at the things that we're fed, mark okay, that feed us that message of, oh, this is what success looks like. This is what good whatever looks like good wife, good parent, good mom, good worker, good business owner. Like, what is success? So we're looking to see, where do we compare? How do we fit in? Are we where we're supposed to be? And in that way, we're then upholding the structures because we're looking to the structures to tell us how we're supposed to be. And then we are trying to align ourselves either how close or how far away we are to that. So this is that comparison. We look at the people that we see to tell us how we fit in. So this is the comparisonitis, when we are focusing on comparing our accomplishments to someone else's to determine relative importance. But as I mentioned in the intro, like with imposter syndrome, comparisonitis is yet another way of individualizing something being done to you. This is part of the structure. This is conditioning. This is the design of our social systems because we are wired in our instincts to uphold the social systems. And I'm going to get to that in a minute, but it's essentially what Gabor Mate talks about, these early, like, this is what's safe, this is what isn't. And we're learning to put aside our authenticity in prioritizing attachment, which places our sense of self outside of ourselves. So we're seeing each other through all of our own programming and all of our experience that is affirming this programming. And then we judge each other based off of this societal scale of what is normal and good. And this is because we live in a hierarchical society. Better or lesser equals level of okayness, right? So comparisonitis is natural in a hierarchical society where okayness is measured by how close you are to a norm compared to someone else. How close to the ideological perfect you are. So this all is conditioning us to look outside of ourselves, to compare ourselves to whether we are okay or not, and where we should be or shouldn't be. And that often will then activate our nervous system into whatever our survival response is, which then participates in upholding the systems. Because that's part of how we're wired, is that self-preservation, and we are social creatures. So it's all tied in together. Your amygdala, that part of your brain that's wired to keep you safe, is designed to fire when there's danger and tell you, oh, there's danger here. So it will send off your body's danger signals when your relationship to the societal rules are threatened, because it can mean that you won't have what you need, be it like belonging, be it money, whatever it is to be okay living in this world that we live in. For me, when my danger signals go off, it looks like freezing, almost like a paralysis. Sometimes it's a mental confusion, avoidance, or even obliviousness. Having an understanding of what your response is and what it looks like and how it comes out and how you move through it is really helpful for these instances when it goes off, so that you can engage it, so that it's not dominating. And I have a few episodes where I talk about shifting from reactive to responsive, and I have my stress response quiz to help you kind of understand some of those responses and how they're showing up for you, so that you can engage it with intention. So I'll have links in the show notes to those. I'll give you a couple examples briefly of client experiences with this. And sometimes freezing, as I'll show you in this first example, it doesn't look like not doing anything, like a momentary freezing. It's like feeling overwhelmed and not taking action. So when she gets on social media, which she needed to do for business, she would lock up. She'd get stuck in looking at what everybody else is doing and thinking about how she's not doing enough and she's not making that kind of money and what it looks like in how it's being represented, primarily through social. Social is a really big place that exacerbates this, but like looking at that. So that comparison of level of success and how much money is being made. What we did to address that was check on the reality of the comparison. Because usually when we're making comparisons, when we're in that comparisonitis, as it were, we're only looking at one aspect. We're not looking at the full picture. We're not looking at the whole picture of what all they're doing, what's going on in their life, and what's going on in our life, and what our full picture looks like. So really checking in on the reality of the comparison. What are we actually comparing? What is reasonable? What is true? And then spending some time reconnecting to herself, her experience, her knowledge, what she actually has instead of this feeling of diminishment that she was getting from comparing this one aspect. Really looking at what is it that she wants even? What is her emotional space? What are her desires? Like really pulling that compass, remagnetizing essentially her own inner compass, what's going on for her, what's true, what's real for her. And then making choices based in that clear inner compass, the awareness of what she might actually be admiring in somebody else and how that relates to what her choices and how she shows up to her business look like, knowing what's being admired and how it actually relates to her or doesn't, and what she actually has. And so what it is that comparison is pointing to her that she needs more of or wants to do because there feels like there's a deficiency. So it's really a recalibration. I'm going to bring that back because those are part of the steps that we walk through. For another example, I have a client who got a compliment, actually, that was, "Oh, you're so together." And for her, that was triggering because she has felt for so much of her life that she's not together. Everybody else has things down and she's the one who's failing and struggling. There was a pressure to look good and have it all together, as it were. So what having it all together looked like. The person that gave her the compliment clearly saw one piece of her, but not the whole of her, and complimented her on that piece of it without knowing that this was a big piece, because what it was is she has it together because she prepares. But needing to take time to prepare because of having a different way of thinking about things, needing to take more time. She has neurodivergencies, so like taking that space to really get things together was actually looked down on. She would take longer than other people to prepare, and so she was picked on for needing that time, which led her to feel like something was wrong with her and fear that she was one of the people who couldn't handle things and would eventually be turned out. So it was this chain of messaging that was different means lesser. Lesser means broken. Broken means failing. Having it together means success. Success means you belong, and belonging means safety. So needing to take that time meant that she couldn't really have it all together. So really breaking that down and taking a look at what was this messaging? What got triggered here? Like, where is the comparison happening that hurt her and that created this sense of deficiency? So that we could engage it and heal it so that she could accept a compliment and be able to show up to it in a way where she's not perpetuating any of these dynamics that were so harmful to her. Because that is something that we will do. Sometimes we get the thing that we think is the success and then we perpetuate the belief system in how we show up in the world and what we do, especially if you're a business or you're an influencer, you have a platform. We perpetuate those stories of what it means to be okay because we got that level of okayness. This goes back to that, like, we don't notice the places where we belong. We notice the places where we don't belong. but how important it is to listen to people who are not allowed to belong so that we aren't closing doors, that we are creating more expansion. We're not buying into the restrictions that our society perpetuates. So you'll notice like a lot of these things tap into that level of security, how secure we feel, how safe we feel, whether we belong, whether we have enough money to be okay in the world that we live in, those sorts of things. And it did get me thinking, like, as I was looking at that, like, how many of us are just going along with what isn't okay for us? Like, we're making what's not okay, and going along with, like, that stuff that actually isn't okay, thinking that everyone else is okay when they're just doing the same thing. We're just upholding these systems. We're upholding these ways of being. We're upholding these norms because we think that everybody else is bought into it, so we have to buy into it. But I don't think we think about it as like buying into it. We just think, well, this is what you do, instead of going, well, is it actually working for anybody? Because if you look at like mental wellness in our world and in our country, in the US, it's not great. So my inclination would be to say, no, it's not actually working very well. So my invitation when we look at this and when we pull this apart and see that this isn't just you, this is a system. It's something that is certainly experienced inside of yourself, and it plays into the ways we're structured. That it is important to acknowledge that we have individual power and we have collective power. We wield both intentionally and unconsciously. But when we only see the individual power, when we only focus on that empowerment, self-empowerment, and we leave the collective piece unconscious, it will ultimately disempower us entirely. Because what we're doing is essentially placing a Band-Aid on something that's there's still dirt in the wound. That's probably a light way of saying it, actually. But like, we're not cleaning out the wound so that it can heal. We're not addressing the real issue. So when we talk about comparisonitis, the real issue of what does having our sense of self outside of ourselves uphold? And what does it look like to bring that back? I think that it's hard to acknowledge the societal factor because it can initially feel disempowering. I think sometimes when we think about something happening to us or something bigger, a social system impacting us, we think, oh, well, that is our sense of self, our power being outside of ourselves. Because we've been conditioned around individualism. So to have power, it has to be centered inside of ourselves. So anything that doesn't center power in you as an individual appears like it's taking your power, which is why, all the empowerment work uses terms like addressing imposter syndrome and comparisonitis, because it focuses on addressing the individual component and individual power. And then framing issues like this as individual ailments, then we naturally focus on only the individual issue and fail to address the systemic components. So it essentially becomes a distraction technique that allows industries like mine, like coaching, to thrive, but sets us up to allow the problem to perpetuate by avoiding really cleaning out the wound and going, okay, by going, okay, we do have individual work to do in order to expand our ability to engage the systemic. And once we do that individual work, then we can actually come together collectively and recognize that we don't want to keep doing the same things. We don't want to contribute to the dynamics that are creating these restrictions and creating this hierarchical design that encourages us to get lost, that makes it safer to get lost. So what do we need to do as individuals? Because, this is ultimately what I do work in, right? Like, I work with individuals. So going back to what I articulated with that client, it's being able to remagnetize our inner compass and engage ongoing self-awareness and emotional resilience work, which allow us then to show up to listening, to learning, to hearing people who aren't allowed to belong in our society in the same way, so that we can see those places more clearly. which is uncomfortable because it's uncomfortable to see that when you're the person who belongs and are essentially excluding other people by playing into these systems. But being able to do that and do that work because we have a sense of self and we are connected to who we are, we can develop community where real change empowerment lies, where we are actually harnessing communal power, collective power. And learning to engage that collective power is where we will create true healing, not just Band-Aids. So I'm going to say it again because I think it's really important. I have individual power and we have collective power. Both are true. And we wield both intentionally and unconsciously. Only seeing the individual will leave the collective unconscious, which will disempower us entirely. Because a Band-Aid is only going to do so much good. It's not sustainable when we haven't addressed the healing that needs to happen. And I'm not going to sugarcoat, this is big work. It's hard and it does take energy. And there's also a lot of joy to be found in it. There's a lot of freedom to be found in it. Because you're really connecting to yourself, which allows you to then really connect with other people. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, if you are currently struggling with comparing yourself to others, remember, it isn't your fault. This isn't a deficiency in you. It is a natural byproduct of our hierarchical society and harmful societal norms. So I'm going to go back to that first example with my client. First, check in on the reality of the comparison. You're usually only looking at one aspect, not the full picture. So what is really true here? About them, about you, about what you even know. Because there's a lot of things you're probably making assumptions about. So what do you actually know versus what are you making up? And then understand the trigger. Understand what is important to you about this. There is a reason you are making a comparison, and it's not about truth. So it's not about you actually being deficient. It is about something feeling deficient in your life, something needing attention, something needing care, something needing engagement. The trigger is there for a reason. It's not the surface, they're better than you, they have more than you. It's what is that thing that is grabbing your attention? Because it's probably something that needs your attention for you, but not in that surface way, right? So the next piece is reconnecting to yourself. Reconnect to what is true for you. What is your experience? What is your knowledge? What do you have? What is already present? Be aware of your emotions. Emotions are information about what's going on for you, not necessarily about what's true external to you, but how you're experiencing something. So connect to that and then connect to what you want. What are you desiring of? What's important to you? Really connect to yourself. Get in tune with that compass. Remagnetize. And then make choices based off of those pieces of information. Reality, the trigger, the self. Make choices based on that to allow yourself space to learn and grow. So intentionally engaging these areas that are tender and giving yourself support as you do that, knowing that they're tender. And there's a reason that they're tender. There's a reason that they feel like a button. Again, if you are feeling really in the weeds with this and you feel too stuck to really be able to reflect on your own, again and again, there is nothing wrong with you. Sometimes we need someone who isn't so close to it to help us disentangle. And that's what I'm here for. So grab a spot on my calendar for a free exploration call. It's in the show notes. I would love to talk to you. And I will end with 4 reminders from my own decades of self-work that have helped me personally. I was never broken, only disconnected from my truth. I didn't make bad choices. I made the best choices I could based on the experience and awareness I had at the time. Each choice, however consciously made, offers opportunities to learn and leads to opportunities to make new choices, and I am worth those opportunities. I am valuable, and that value is not diminished by anyone else. I can both give and take up space. Allowing space to listen to myself and others honors our humanity and value. I am not alone, and I am worth supporting. Find people to share the journey with. Learn what it is like to be in community. It may be hard to make space for that too, amongst all the other things that you are navigating, but it is so necessary, and it is the root of all of the things that you are struggling with. It is the root of our ability to create change. Thank you for being here, and I will talk to you all next time. Thanks for listening. I so appreciate you being here. If you got something out of today's episode, please share it. Leave me a review, take a screenshot, and post it on social with a shout out to me. Send it to a friend or, all of the above. Want to hang out more? Join me on Instagram. Or better yet, get on my mailing list to make sure you don't miss out on anything. And remember, your possibilities are as unlimited as you are. Allow yourself to shine, my friend. The world needs your light. See you next time.